Hello, everyone. It is my honor and pleasure to welcome you to Getting to the Root of Modern Dis-ease, merging ancient science and modern wisdom to remember wholeness. In this self-empowering summit, we will envision a new paradigm for healing based on wholeness, tapping into foundational wisdom, both ancient and modern, to create the conditions that favor deep and lasting healing of body, mind, and spirit. I invite you to step out of the box with me and our panel of healers as we open a deep and transformative conversation that gets to the very root of modern dis-ease and allows access to the healing powers that are your birthright. I'm your host, Gina Sager, and today I'm going to talk to you about foundational healing, shifting the paradigm from broken to whole. But before we do that, I'd like to just take a moment to settle in with a short meditation just to make sure that we're actually here. So find your seat wherever you are, make yourself comfortable. As you settle into your seat, notice if you are in your body or if you're thinking about the past or the future. But for now, see if you can come into your body and feel the weight of the body against the chair upon which you sit or the floor. Imagine that your sitting bones are like the roots of trees that can be directed through the seat of the chair, through the floor of the room in which you are sitting, and all the way through the foundation of the building, deep and wide into the earth. And to the extent that you're able, really let yourself settle into a deep place of stability and strength, dropping into a place of center and ground. Now, if by chance you don't have access to that place of center and ground, or if you're like many of us and you've never known that place, that's okay too. Just let yourself imagine what it might be like to be so comfortable and safe and held that you could truly surrender and rest. And then allow that sense of being held and supported, whether real or imagined, to be the container for our time now. So grounding and rooting into the earth, while at the same time now you reach the crown of the head up toward the heavens. And you might feel the spine grow long and tall, noticing space arising between vertebrae. Exhale, releasing shoulder blades, and as they slide down the back, notice how that draws open the collarbones and opens the heart. Release and relax the shoulders to the extent that you can. If your mind is busy or spinning, or if you're not quite here yet and you'd like to settle, see if it helps to turn your palms to face down in your lap. If just by stopping, you're tapping into the deep level of exhaustion with which you live, and you wish to stay awake for now, see if it helps to turn the palms to face up. There's no right answer here. Just choose what feels the most supportive to you. And finally, notice the head and where it lives in relation to the spine. Most of us are moving so quickly through time and space that we're leaning forward, leading with the chin, eagerly anticipating the next thing. But for the purposes of our work today, the intention is to just be here now, in this body, in this moment. So you might like to just tuck your chin slightly back, like you're pushing a book back on a shelf. Tip it down if you need, so that it's parallel to the ground. And then either allow your eyes to gently close or let your gaze fall soft and unfocused a couple of feet in front of you. And when you breathe out, just release absolutely everything that's come before this. The past is gone, the future's not here yet. Make a deliberate and conscious choice to be right here, right now, exactly as you are. In this moment, in this body, in this room. And then just briefly exploring this place from which we begin by noticing the body in which you sit. But rather than thinking about the body, start to notice how it literally feels in this moment to you. Just notice the tightness or tension that the body carries, the aches or the pains. If you know the part of the body where your stress tends to get stuck, see what's going on there today. No judgment required, just a check in. We're just gathering information. Listen deeply in this stillness to any part or parts of this body that for any reason seem to need extra care, attention, or healing. Or perhaps other parts or parts that for some reason, understood or not, don't feel connected, feel as if they're distant or don't belong to you. And just notice it all. And then take in all of the information that's available to you in this moment that the body's willing to share. Stop thinking about what you found and literally drop into your skin and come to your senses. Feel the weight of the body against the chair or the floor. Notice the length of the spine from inside. Become aware of the weight and position of hands, the sensation of clothing, and the temperature of the air touching your skin. Just for now, come to your senses. And then notice this breath, the miracle of this breath that breathes you to life. Not to change or control breath, just to open to receive the gift of breath. We speak of taking a breath, but actually it's a gift to us in every single moment. And in this moment, somebody somewhere breathes out and not back in. So for just a moment, sit with the gift of breath. Noticing the speed with which it comes and goes and the ease with which it moves in and out. Feeling where in the body the breath feels the most alive. And if you're able to stay present to more than one breath, rest in the space that lives between breaths. It's a natural invitation for us to pause in that space between breaths. And then gratefully receive the next breath when it comes. Take it in deeply and completely. When it's time to let it go, open and release with no regret. Just take a moment to watch yourself being breathed. And finally, as we begin, check in with your mind. Notice what you've brought here today, the thoughts and the plans and the expectations about this summit or your life. As you notice what's going on in your mind, notice your relationship to whatever is there. And let yourself be honest. Maybe you know that your habit is to fight with your thoughts, to try to change them. Perhaps you believe everything that you think. Or maybe you pick through and only attend to the things that confirm your version of reality. And of course, it may be that there are some thoughts that arise that you really want to escape from. So just take a moment to see what is true for you. No judgment. And then bring the left hand to the heart and the right hand to the crown of the head. Imagine for a moment that there's a door between your very busy mind and the vast, open, spacious stillness of your heart. Let yourself open that door and just for now, spill any busyness of mind, any worries or expectations into the spaciousness of the heart space and let them dissolve. They'll be here later when you need them, but for now, just let go. Bring the right hand down to the eyebrow center, inviting all of your senses to turn inward now. So easy to be distracted in this world in which we live, but you get to choose what gets your attention. So choose to turn in now, to be here in the body, in this moment, in this room. And finally, bring the right hand down to join left over the heart. And if you haven't done so yet today, feel your heart beating. It's a pretty big deal to be alive, to be safe enough to be still for a moment, to be present in this amazing and magical and beautiful world. And if you wish, perhaps you'll send out some of the fruits of our work together to the people in this world that do not have these luxuries today, the luxury of safety or even breath. Wish for any and all good that comes of our work to be a gift to the world. And then allow your heart to receive these words from Mary Oliver that you may well know. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down in the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed and stroll in the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Mm. So allow your ears to take in the sound of this bell. Mm. So thank you from my heart for settling in with me. It is truly my honor and pleasure to offer you this amazing summit with 27 visionaries and healers and wisdom keepers who are going to help us find this place of presence, of wholeness, of ease. And I'm thrilled to be able to start off by sharing my story with you. So I think the best way to explain to you how and why this summit has come to pass is to tell you my story. I'll do my best to keep it short, but it has been a long and rocky journey, I'll tell you that. So I consider myself to be a recovering general surgeon. I spent most of my life in pursuit of a medical degree. It's all I ever wanted to do since I could remember. I spent 11 years in practice, 7 of which were in solo practice. And I tell you what, that is not for the faint of heart. You know, I went to medical school with a deep desire and a heartfelt wish to help people and take care of people. And the training process was really quite hard. And I added to that being a woman in a traditionally male-oriented field, and the need to be perfect and right. And I really, as much as I loved my work, I really very quickly started to burn out. The whole of the professionalism of my work was asking me to suppress my basic nature, my need to connect with people, my capacity to be in awareness of my heart and my emotions, because there's no place for that. There was no place in that, for that, in my training or in my practice of surgery. And I didn't really think of it at the time, but retrospectively, to deal day in and day out with emergencies, I didn't understand that the emergencies out there without proper training over here are emergencies in here. I remember reading a book called The House of God when I was in training. And one of the rules of the House of God, which was a satire about a medical hospital, was that in the event of an emergency, take your own pulse first. And, that makes sense, but I don't remember learning that. I was always on alert. I was trained to be on alert. I didn't ever sleep. I was always needing to be ready to go. So again, I was really very quickly on the road to burnout. And then, as luck would have it, there were a couple of interventions, and now I'm able to call them sort of like Lemony Snicket series of unfortunate events. But while they were terrible, they actually probably saved my life. I had 2 lawsuits filed pretty much back to back, neither of which made any sense or were founded in any negligence. However, it didn't matter. It still felt the same. I only share them because they really introduced me to some things in Western medicine that I might not have known about had I not had this experience. So the first suit was me visiting a patient of mine who had been mine forever, who had surgery by and a complication as a result of someone else's surgery. And I was visiting her as a friend. And when she died of a complication of that other surgery, I was accused of not protecting her from her other doctors. It completely devastated me, and I wasn't really sure how to make sense of it. But it turned out to be a very protracted affair, and it was 5 years in and out of depositions and courtrooms, and it was horrifying and devastating. During that time, a second suit was filed, and that was a suit that a situation that had happened 5 years before, where I was asked to consult on a man in the intensive care unit who really was in multiple organ system failure. There was nothing that anyone could do to help him, and I said that that was my opinion. I wrote it in the chart. Everyone agreed with me, but 5 years later, his family sued me, and I remember in the deposition, the attorney asking me again and again, if you could not save this man, why didn't you ask for help? And so, I was shocked and I was horrified. And I was also aware that I didn't actually have an existence outside of my role as a surgeon. And so when the first case actually went to trial and I was found guilty, along with other colleagues, of not protecting my patient from her other doctors, it was as if I shattered and disappeared, and I realized there was nobody in there. The second case was dismissed outside of court, but it didn't matter because I already had sort of lost a sense of what I was doing and why I was doing it. It didn't occur to me that I could leave my practice, so I really just suffered pretty much in silence for 5 more years after that. Several things again that I realized before I chose to finally leave my practice was that I really felt like the suppression of my emotion, the inability to find a place where it was safe to be me and work through all of these traumatic experiences, including the lawsuits, really negatively contributed to my sense of dis-ease. I mean, there was no place to be me, and nobody wanted to hear about it. Nobody wanted to honor it. And I was told multiple times to not take it personally, but it felt personal. On a sort of grander scale, when I started to look at what was being revealed to me as a result of these lawsuits, I started to realize that in the beginning of my practice, it was sort of more of a relationship that I had with my patients. We knew about family members and we talked about their life. And once we started to take on this notion of evidence-based medicine, it felt like the whole interaction, the whole relationship was depersonalized. So part of the angst that I was experiencing without knowing it, I think, was the loss of the art of medicine, and to that end, we started worrying a lot about who had insurance and who was going to pay for healthcare. And I think that seems to me to be disempowering to patients, and people stopped helping themselves. They gave up their care to experts. The practice of medicine became increasingly patriarchal, and the care seemed to be taking out of healthcare. And I didn't feel comfortable there. again, it didn't occur to me to leave. The other thing that, of course, became crystal clear in those lawsuits was that we really do see in the Western culture death is a failure. Somebody did something wrong if somebody doesn't get well or dies. It's a failure to recognize death is a part of life. There is true malpractice happening in the world, but honestly, much of what happens in the realm of liability is really an unaccepted or unexpected consequence of life. It's not somebody doing something wrong. It's just something that happens. And I started to really wish for the old days of medicine. I'm in Baltimore, and Hopkins is a big institution here. And Sir William Osler said, more important than the disease the patient has is the patient with the disease. And that's what I was missing. And I think that this traumatic experience really made that crystal clear for me. So again, I didn't think of leaving. I thought I signed up for it and I had to stay. And I was suffering mightily. I didn't breathe. I didn't eat. I was pretty much a mess. And I didn't have any idea what I was going to do. I just sort of held my breath and went to work every day. Somehow in 1997, I ran across the work of Jon Kabat-Zinn, and I had bought his book, Full Catastrophe Living, as I had finished my residency. And there was a workshop that he was doing in Florida, and I was in the middle of depositions, and so I went. I didn't know what meditation was, and I didn't know him really, but we connected deeply, and I knew that meditation somehow was going to be a part of my healing, even though I wasn't clear at the time. That simple interaction with him in the midst of the chaos opened up space for me to see in a bigger way. And so even before I left my practice, I enrolled in Tai Sophia Institute, which is now Maryland University of Integrative Health here in Laurel, Maryland, in the Applied Healing Arts program. And I was introduced to a lot of ancient wisdom traditions, a lot of religions that I didn't have any awareness of, and just really my worldview continued to expand, and I kept reflecting back on how small and tight the Western medical model was. My open suffering with food intolerances and GI distress led me to a practice of Ayurveda. After a workshop, I started studying on my own, and then ultimately more intensively with my Ayurveda teacher, Amadea Morningstar, who you'll hear from in this summit. And Ayurveda also increased my capacity to pay attention to what was true in the moment and to be curious about my experience in a new way, to live with the seasons, to be sort of introduced to the notion of balance, and that I had something to do with that balance by the choices that I make. Now, I was still burned out, even though I was expanding my worldview. And one day I took a day off just to decide what I was going to do. And on that day, sitting on my porch in April, I was visited by an owl. And I hadn't really had any kind of mystical experiences in my life, but this seemed like an invitation to open to a new way of seeing the world. And this owl sat on the ground and looked at me for hours. And while I didn't know exactly why he or she was there, the question that came to me was the obvious owl question, like, who are you? And what is it that you want to do with your wild and precious life? Because this doesn't feel like it. And that interaction with that owl led me to go to work the next day to make an announcement I was closing my practice. And within 6 weeks, I left. I sold the practice, I locked the doors, and I got on a train 6 days later to go to study for the first time with Jon Kabat-Zinn in the mindfulness-based stress reduction. So I still am functioning at the level of Western medical mentality. So, in the same way that somebody walks in the door with acute appendicitis and I do surgery and they're better, I thought since I cut off myself from my medical practice, I was going to be healed. And I was really, really surprised to find out that that was not the case. I was completely shocked to be completely unable to breathe or eat or sleep or keep my shoulders off my ears while I was in a meditation retreat. It didn't occur to me the condition that my condition was in, and I had no idea what to do with myself. I had an interaction with Saki Santarelli, who is Jon Kabat-Zinn's partner, in one of the days of meditation. We were invited in that day to feel what we were feeling for what felt like hours. And I didn't know what he wanted me to do. what is a feeling? I could think a lot, but I didn't really know what a feeling was. And so I just I stayed in my mind in the whole of the meditation, you know, and honestly, where I went with it was he's asking stupid questions. And so I made sort of a spreadsheet in my head. Okay, so I'm going to have to talk to him about the fact that, bless his heart, he's really giving bad instructions because I don't know what he's talking about. And I'm a surgeon, so I must be the most intelligent person in the world. So I made this list of things. I'm going to tell him he's not doing a good job. And if he says this, I'll say that. If he says this, I'll say that. Because always as a surgeon, it's necessary to be prepared. So finally, when he rang the bell at the end of meditation, I went up to the stage and I said, Saki, listen, this meditation. And he immediately was concerned because he knew that I had left my practice and he was already sort of following me around, as was John Kabat-Zinn, like, are you sure you're okay? And again, I'm thinking, I cut out the problem. It's over. I'm fine. So I said, you know, it's really frustrating to sit out there and hear you ask for something that I don't understand. You know, you want me to know, you want to know what I feel, but I don't feel anything. And so I think your instructions are not clear. And he closed his eyes and paused for a moment and sighed as he and John did. And finally he said, what did you want to feel then, Gina? That was totally not on my list. So I moved into my next mode, which was, I don't think you heard me. I want specific and concise instructions so that I know what you want me to do, because I'll do it. I just don't know what you want. It's frustrating to not know what you're asking me to do. And again, he paused and sighed and stroked his goatee and opened his eyes and said, so frustration is sort of a feeling, wouldn't you say? Again, this was not on my list. So I said to him, Saki, why can't you just listen to me? I'm just trying to tell you. And I look up and he's crying. And I said, okay, I think I'm in the wrong place. There's something wrong with these people. I don't understand what's happening here. But I also didn't understand why I was getting wet. There was the water falling on my hands because I didn't see or feel the tears coming from my eyes. And he came into my space and he grabbed my shoulders and came right close to my face and said, Gina, are you sure you're not feeling something? And I tell you, I remember it as clearly as if it happened yesterday. It was like a glass of ice water was thrown in my face. And I remember gasping and saying, oh my God, Saki, I have missed my entire life. It was absolutely stunning to me to realize that I had never, ever been present for a single moment in my life without thinking about the next thing. And it was overwhelming to me. I didn't know what to do. I'd like to tell you that then everything changed and everything's been perfect since, but I didn't have the energy habits in place to allow me to immediately to jump into a different version of reality. And so I went back home with absolutely a new awareness, but it took a lot of time to move into a new space. I tell you, it took me well over 2 years to even be able to breathe. And I still have to work on that. I trained myself to suppress my awareness of my body, my awareness of breath, my awareness of emotion. And this will probably be a lifelong journey. I continued, though, to be insistent that mindfulness was an important part of my healing. And so I did some advanced training with John Kabat-Zinn in 2003 and 2004. And then I started to teach mindfulness after taking 2 years to really learn how to embody the practice. I wanted to speak from my own experience. And while it was starting to change my life, it was still clear to me that I was still teaching and experiencing mindfulness a little bit from my head and not from my experience. And I didn't really know how to get into a felt sense experience of what the mindfulness and meditation practices had to offer. I started then in 2005 to have some food allergies and intolerances that were really more severe. And in 2007, things really shifted because I had an immune system challenge. I was required to have a PPD to continue to teach yoga in a hospital, and something just went haywire in my immune system. I had had headaches before, but boy, they came fast and furious, and I had them 3 to 5 times a week. I had GI distress. I couldn't eat much of any food. I had pain in my neck and shoulders. I couldn't even lift pans out of my cabinet without pain. I was a terrible mess. And then I started having palpitations. Well, as crazy as it is, and please do not try this at home, my Western medical understanding told me that this was like, I could go to a Western medical doctor and I could find out what my heart rhythm was. But I knew that this was happening at a deeper level than what the superficial tests were going to show. And it was clear to me then that I needed to learn how to harness my nervous system so that I could heal. That clearly something had gone off in my immune system because of my chronic state of depletion. And it was really at that time when I started to get curious about the possibility of trauma being a part of my dis-ease. That was amplified when I had another opportunity to speak to a group of physicians about my transition from Western medicine to teaching mindfulness. And after that conference, which went fine, I literally froze. I mean, it was a felt sense unlike any I had had before. My face literally froze. I couldn't move my face. I was aware of going through the motions of my life, but I was flat and numb and completely dead inside. And the good news about that was it was probably one of the first times in my life that I was really left with a felt sense experience rather than a story about what the experience was. And so that was revolutionary. I knew that Richard Davidson, who's one of the Western neuroscientists that has collaborated with John Kabat-Zinn, said many times before that we have a felt sense deficiency in our culture. And up to this point, my only default was my intellect. So I knew that I had to come into some greater degree of balance. Because my intellect was my strongest suit, I started doing research on the nervous system. I saw a lot of stuff about fight and flight. That's not how I felt. I really felt like I was exhibiting more of a freeze response, and I don't remember learning any of that in medical school. So I came across Peter Levine's work, who I think it was Waking the Tiger. He started talking about trauma, and he indicated that to him, headaches were often a result of a freeze response. And furthermore, the freeze response was often a result of unrecognized and unresolved trauma. And so right then I started to be curious and honest and realized that I had had more than my share of trauma in my life. Lots of adverse childhood events, the trauma of practicing surgery, the trauma of holding all of the trauma of the malpractice. I mean, it was a lot of stuff. I really did not want to acknowledge the effect that my past trauma had on me because I still was stuck in that sort of masculine, I'm strong and nothing's going to bother me place that I had trained myself to live in. But I had to just come clean. I made a deal with myself that I was going to heal in this lifetime, and I had to face whatever was necessary to be faced in order to heal. So here I am, ready and willing to just really start to work on the trauma. And the day after I made this decision, I got a phone call that my mother had died in a house fire. So again, all of my emotion and experience got sucked up so that I could go through the motions that had to be gone through to move through this traumatic experience. And I know that when I don't allow the experience that I'm having, my headaches and all of my symptoms really get worse. So that was important information. I knew that there was a wellspring of pain and trauma and unprocessed grief and emotion in there. But honestly, I was afraid to open the door because I thought I would die or drown. I sort of decided that maybe my lot in life was to get used to living with chronic pain, to get used to headaches limiting what I could do, to really just know that I was going to fail to thrive for the whole rest of my life. And I was going to have to go through this existence, really existing rather than living. I've seen chronic stress defined as highly well-armored hopelessness. And that's exactly what it felt like, just completely numb and dead inside. And curiously, it didn't occur to me to ask for help. It didn't occur to me that anybody could understand or help me, nor did I feel safe asking anyone. And I didn't know at that time that this was trauma related as well. So moving along, 6 months later, after the dust had settled from the resolution of my mother's estate, I sought a shamanic healer. And I sought a shamanic healer because, again, in Peter Levine's work, there was just a tiny little line in one of his books that said, in traditional shamanic cultures, when there's a trauma, a shaman is there to help you process the experience and move it along so that it doesn't get stuck. And that shamanic healing would be a beautiful thing for us to do in the Western world, but it's not accepted, so we just don't. I still was in the mindset that I wanted to expand my felt sense of life. And so I decided to explore shamanic healing. I read Sandra Ingerman's book about soul retrieval, and this notion of being fragmented or having lost parts of myself that were necessary to keep me safe really resonated. And so I found a shamanic healer, and you'll hear from my now friend, Monica. Monica didn't know me at all when we first met. And in our first interaction, my first healing and my soul retrieval, she told me things about my life that she has no way to know unless she was hearing it from another realm. And that was a really big deal for me. And again, I was reminded once more that the worldview that I had lived with and the container in which I lived was constricting and too small for the possibilities that exist in the world. And I knew that I had to expand my awareness somehow. She introduced me to the notion of ancestral healing and ancestral trauma. It didn't occur to me that the things that had happened in my family lineage might be affecting me as well. That was important information because I kept thinking to myself that the way that I felt as a result of the traumas in my life seemed over and above what should be happening as a result of those traumas. So understanding that maybe I was carrying more than just my own stuff was really a big deal. At some level, experiencing the mysterious and things that I couldn't understand was really safer and more life affirming and opening than thinking about it was, because my thinking really took me to a smaller place, and I was having a felt sense of that in a new way. So I didn't know at the time, but I think I was just organically allowing myself to move to a state of greater balance. I followed the shamanic healing with archetypal astrology birth chart reading, and you will also hear in this summit from my now friend, Michelle Glynn. And again, she explained to me, without knowing me at the time, my life and how it has indeed been a series of obstacles, but that was sort of the path that was set for me at the moment that I took my first breath. And that really, really helped me. You know, if I wouldn't have known that this path was sort of written in the stars, I think I would have given up. I really think I would have given up. I would not have had the courage to continue to try to heal, to continue to work with my obstacles and see them as opportunities to move to a greater state of balance. I don't think I would have. So these mystical experiences that I had in the middle of it all really seemed to be a very critical piece of my learning to heal. All along, though, I still had this felt sense of deadness and at the same time being wired. I could not settle my nervous system, even though I didn't have actively this sense of feeling anxious or my heart pounding. It was just dis-ease, continuous dis-ease, always with time pressure, always feeling like the worst case scenario was about to happen, never occurring to me to ask for help, and not really having people in my life. You know, I realized that it had been well over 20 years since I had any close relationships because I was so busy trying to survive. And that was not okay with me anymore. I didn't want to live in that place of survival mode. And I knew that that was an old habit that was left over from my medical training, and I didn't know how to get out. I knew Western medicine couldn't help me, and I visited many alternative and complementary and integrative practitioners, but I found many of them to practice within the Western medical model, you know, sort of blaming me for not getting better without understanding that there was really something under my cognitive radar that was running my show that I did not have access to. So 4 years ago, when I continued to struggle along these lines, although, you know, I was very functionally dysfunctional, I started looking at a video by Donna Eden. And I had picked up Donna Eden's book around the same time, I think, that I picked up Full Catastrophe Living. And I remembered that something in her energy medicine book resonated at the time. So I looked at the book again, and I realized that in the course of my understanding myself, one of the things that was clear to me really early on was a felt sense of disconnection, not just from the outer world or from my heart or from my purpose, but literally in my body, a left-right split. And in Donna Eden's book, I had underlined and read and starred this piece about the homolateral condition. And from the energetic perspective, what she says is that when there's been a crisis or a trauma, the body in its infinite wisdom gathers resources, pulls them in so that you can deal with the immediate threat. And then when the crisis is gone, the resources are meant to be redistributed again. Now, this sounded really very familiar and very close to what I understood about Western neuroscience, but somehow getting it from a more energetic perspective allowed it to go in a deeper way. I started to do a homolateral repatterning, which is really just a crossover, reminding the body of its natural crossover pattern from right to left and left to right. The brain controls the opposite side of the body. Right side of the brain controls the left side of the body. Left side of the brain controls the right side of the body. And we have this spiraling, this crossover pattern all the way down to our DNA. So when I started to restore that crossover, I started to feel a little bit more ease. I began doing her very simple daily energy routine. And very quickly, the pain that I had had in my neck for over 20 years started to resolve. I still had headaches, but they seemed to decrease in frequency and intensity, and I was really encouraged. And above and beyond that, it was really important for me to know that I had the power in my own hands to change my felt sensoriality. I had felt so disempowered and so lost, looking out there for somebody to help me without ever thinking that I have the power in my own hands. And so the self-empowerment piece and the present moment awareness and the learning to trust my body's message was really important. I learned in my energy medicine work that we are all energetic beings. And I sort of knew that as a Western medical practitioner, right? We do EEGs and EKGs and EMGs. We know that the cells carry a charge on their membrane, which allows the influx and efflux of information and nutrients across the cell membrane. But we don't really talk about ourselves as being energetic beings. Everything is energy. And one of the principles of energy is that it needs to move. It needs space to move. And when it doesn't have space to move and it gets stuck, it can cause dis-ease. It also moves in patterns, and some of those patterns are predictable, some of them are less predictable, but regardless, energy can be repatterned, and often it happens like that, which was really good news for me. I first dismissed it as being far too simplistic for the complexity of my issues, but very soon I realized that it was really making a difference in a way nothing else had. We study 9 different energy systems in the Eden Energy Medicine program, and one of my best friends has become something called triple warmer. So triple warmer is one of the 14 acupuncture meridians that are known in traditional Chinese medicine. And triple warmer is the meridian associated with survival. It is the keeper of habits. And when you're in chronic survival mode, it has the capacity to pull energy from all of the other energy systems because survival is the most important thing. Its partner in a 24-hour cycle across opposite triple warmer is spleen. So when I'm in chronic survival mode, I don't have any energy going to the spleen meridian, and spleen meridian is all about that nurturing, that tending, that digesting and assimilating. I don't have time to nurture myself or care for myself or digest my life or my food when there's an immediate life-threatening emergency. And so that sort of split between those two, the imbalance of power between triple warmer and spleen, again, really was very similar to Western neuroscientific understanding of the autonomic nervous system. So I started to think about this and realized that most of my symptoms were left-sided. In traditional ways of speaking, the left side is the feminine side, the right side is the masculine side. The left side is yin, the right side is yang. So I have a lot of energy going out and not a lot of energy coming back to support me and allow me to come into a state of balance. And so this was really important. And I recognized these patterns in my life, and truly, it's been revolutionary to start to put these pieces together. So I started then going back to the neurology of it all, to the neurobiology of stress, looking at it in the context of triple wormer and spleen, and again, saw tons of overlap. And when I then explored polyvagal theory, which you will also hear about in this amazing summit, I realized that all of these things are like pieces of the same puzzle. We really need to establish a place of safety and connectedness so that we can come into a place of balance. When we live in survival mode, if you look at Western neuroscience and understanding of stress physiology, we're literally robbing ourselves of the capacity to heal. You simply can't heal when you're living in survival mode. So I started being curious, not just about my disease, but about the diseases that we're treating in the Western culture. And when I first began my work back in 2004 in mindfulness, the statistics that were quoted were that 60 to 80% of Western medical visits were due to stress-related illnesses or lifestyle-related choices. I just looked the other day, and now the estimates are 70 to 95%. And so I think that all chronic diseases fall into these categories of lifestyle and stress-related. I think that the mystery illnesses of our day fall into this category of, stress-related. We're robbing ourselves of the resources that we need to come into some place of balance. And then I recalled from my yoga teacher training this notion that the Western medicine model is like pruning a tree. It's just treating symptoms and treating out here, sort of just keeping all of the symptoms under control. But that Eastern and ancient traditions really try to get to the root and dig up the root of the disease so that from that place, you can actually start to heal. I started looking at this whole picture and thinking, wow, nervous system dysregulation seems to be at the core of a lot of these different diseases. And while I know now that lifestyle diseases are way deeper than just biochemistry and neurology, that at the root, it is disconnection from our heart, disconnection between our head and our heart, disconnection from ourselves and our true purpose, or if you want to say soul, disconnection from nature and the natural rhythms of life, disconnection from sacred, whatever you consider to be sacred, disconnection from each other. This sense of separation is truly at the root of disease, but nervous system dysregulation is a manifestation of that disconnection. So just a little quick and dirty stress physiology. I know you probably know this, but hear it perhaps with new ears. First of all, it's often a surprise to people in my classes that stress is not that thing that happens to you. It is your response to a change in the environment. And the good news about that is that the only thing we can really change is our response to what happens. So stress in its own right is neither good nor bad. It's a response. The problem is that when it's unremitting, it can become destructive. In a perfect world, we're going to be resilient. We're able to rise to the occasion, pull forth the resources that we need to respond to a life-threatening emergency, and then once that threat is passed, come back to baseline. I have the great good fortune of living on a horse farm, and it's sort of like the horses know, when they're startled or spooked, they immediately come into their full activated state. They look around, and once they determine that there's no emergency, it ends, and they go right back to grazing. We don't do that. We hold on to that hyper-vigilant, hyper-reactive neurologic state, and that keeps us continually pulling resources from any capacity to heal, any capacity to restore, because we're always living as if we've got to get away from an emergency. And so I think that once we start to understand that we can literally change our genes, We can change our energy body. We can change our lives by the way that we direct awareness, by the way that we choose to respond to life. I think you start to understand how much power you really have. You know, in medical school, nobody ever told me that you could do anything with the autonomic nervous system. It was said to be involuntary and that you couldn't change it. And it's simply untrue. So I want to be clear again, you cannot heal when you are living in a state of chronic stress. It does not matter what good work you are doing. You may be eating the right food and seeing the right people and doing the right practices. But if you're doing them with any degree of angst or resistance, if you don't believe that what you're doing is going to help, or if you're still in this fight or flight response, it's really not going to help. And understanding the neuroscience of it is interesting and provocative, but it is not enough. The left brain has the tendency to trade mystery for mastery. All that matters is the answer, the right answer, the one right answer. It lives in a world of black and white. It really lives in a world that invites separation. The right side of the brain, which is much less familiar to many of us, certainly was for me, is the part that opens you to your felt sense experience, that opens you to the childlike wonder and awe of this amazing life that you have. And it's childlike wonder and awe regardless of what your story is about it. The magic is out there if you look. It is essential to do, as Jill Bolte Taylor advises us, to step to the right. The antidote to your busy thinking, worrying mind is to come to your senses, because your brain cannot do two things at the same time. So by doing that, by stepping to the right, by noticing that I'm overly anxious and there's not an immediate life-threatening danger, by pausing and taking a breath and looking at my natural world, or feeling my feet touching the ground, or taking a sip of tea and noticing the taste, I'm shifting myself back to a place of greater balance and ease. Now, for me, the mind is not in the realm of Newtonian physics. It's really more quantum physics. It's nonlinear, and the world is nonlinear. So if we're just living in the left side of our brain looking for the right answer and things that make sense, we're effectively cutting off half of who we are. And again, that's my opinion about why there's so much chronic stress, because we're totally out of balance. We're stuck in the belief that all that is true is linear and logical and language-based and literal, and we're missing the sense of experience and joy and the felt sense of life that brings us the mystery and the magic that allows us to be alive rather than thinking about what it's like to be alive. This is all shifting us again to a place of greater balance, a place of greater ease. And one of the things that people worry about when they hear this is that they're going to lose their edge. But the thing is that we have 100 billion neurons in our physical brain, and each one has the possibility to make 10,000 different connections. So if you are resting in this place where you have access to both hemispheres of your brain, the possibilities truly are infinite. And so it's not going to take away from your edge. Your willingness to step to the right, to come to your senses, to find ease in your body is going to enhance your capacity to hone your intellect, because there's more space. And that really is important. The problem is that I lived for most of my life, and I think a lot of people do, with this background noise that something else should be happening, that this isn't right, that if I'm suffering, then I or somebody else has done something wrong and that must be fixed. That's again the same analogy of just living in the left side of the brain. We're living half a life, and we need to come into a greater state of balance. You know, Albert Einstein says that the rational mind is a faithful servant and the intuitive mind a sacred gift. We have created a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. So stepping to the right, realizing that the messiness of life and emotions are what lends the richness to our life. To learn to see the full catastrophe, to learn to see crisis as opportunity, to realize that we always get to choose what gets our attention, to understand that our thoughts and our emotions, whether they're recognized or not, are literally affecting the way that our genes are expressing, the way that our neurons are connecting. This is an enormous amount of power, and it happens whether we're paying attention or not. So the more present we are, the more control we have over our life. And so we're shifting this place from a place of disconnection to a place of connection, which lends itself to ease. Now, the other thing that you guys probably know about is this notion of having a brain in your gut and a brain in your heart. You know, you'll hear about the polyvagal theory, but the vagus nerve controls sort of everything. And 80% of the fibers of the vagus nerve in the gut are not going from the brain to the gut, but are going from the gut to the brain. Your gut intuition is feeding information to your brain, and this is how we make decisions about how to be in life. There are more neurons in the heart than there are cardiac cells. Your heart is informing the nervous system about what is true. When we're just in the left side of our brain, we're telling stories. These things are felt sense, and they're more based in the actual reality of the moment. We are way more than what we think, and yet what we think informs how we are and how we experience life as well or unwell. And that's important. So to hopefully wrap up, the nervous system dysregulation that we suffer from is not the cause of our disease, but the result of our disconnection, in my opinion. Disconnection from our true self, our purpose, disconnection from heart, from nature, from each other. And another piece that's been important for me, disconnection from our feminine nature, regardless of our gender. Disconnection from the part that recognizes the essential need to nurture and tend and connect and love each other and take care of each other and ourselves. This is another piece of the right side of our brain which allows us to connect mind and body. So the way to wholeness, I think, is through reconnection, balance, and trust. Balancing left and right, masculine and feminine, yin and yang, effort and surrender. We require balance in the same way that all things in the natural world do. And it's time for us to learn to recognize our dis-ease as a call to action, as a mindfulness bell, as an indication that something needs our attention. And when we can approach this calmly, we can actually start to shift our physiology toward a place of healing. When we recognize the power that we have, it increases the amount of trust that we have to change our situation. And when we experience trust, that too settles the nervous system, moves us into a greater state of balance. And when we're more balanced, we have access to the restorative and healing functions that are our birthright. So I think it is essential, it has been essential for me to realize that each one of us comes into this life with a purpose. We may not know what that purpose is, but the gifts that we show up with are ones that the world needs. And when we try to fit ourselves into a box that doesn't serve us, when we cut off pieces of ourselves to fit in a society that doesn't understand us, I think that we're asking ourselves to experience dis-ease. So the process of healing is to embrace who you really are, to come to life as you, to learn to express your heart's desire, to discover the medicine that you personally are meant to bring into this lifetime, and give up anything that is too small for that massive and beautiful expression of yourself. Because to live in a place of chronic stress is inflammatory and depressing. And we know now that we have tools that can shift us out of that cultural paradigm that thinks stress is like a normal way to live. I remember carrying it as a badge of honor. Moving into a place that has room for healing, not forcing ourselves to heal, not overworking and Googling and figuring, but learning to create the causes and conditions that allow our nervous system, our body, mind, and spirit to come into a place of balance and integration, because from that place, healing is more likely to occur. Now, a word about balance. Balance is not a place that you get to and stop. It's organic. It's ever-changing. And our ability to maintain balance requires our present moment experience. So we start to notice when we're going off center, no big deal, and we shift back. So we have to train the mind to recognize and honor the messages that the body and the heart are sending to the brain, and take action in the moment to shift ourselves back to a place of balance before the horse gets too far out of the barn. So we're shifting it more quickly so that we're not forming chronic energetic habits that are then harder to get to. So just a couple more things. I'm so excited. I appreciate your attention. I do want to share something that has intrigued me for a long time, and that is that in Ayurveda, um, they describe chronic fatigue syndrome as a conflict between intuition and logic, which is left and right brain, which is masculine, feminine, which is effort and surrender. And I think that we are, again, in an existential crisis with modern disease because we're living a life that's too small. And I cannot say that enough. I've said it a couple of times, but I have to say it again. The invitation here is to rise to the call to be you, to seek balance, to embrace everything that happens in your life as information that will allow you to move to the next step, to shift ever toward balance and ease. And I think that we each have a responsibility to heal because we are connected to all things. And our healing contributes to the healing of the whole. So I appreciate your time in listening to my long story. I hope it has served. You know, I've blazed my own trail. I've really felt very alone, and it's been a long trip. I've learned to pay attention though and dismiss nothing. You know, even today, as I'm talking to you, there's a hawk flying around outside, and I pay attention to things like that because the hawk is showing me that when I get too small and tight, I can't see the big picture. So just seeing this beautiful bird allows me to open up new space and to make more room. I am learning to use crisis as opportunity. And the more my life starts to change and the more I move out of this frozen state, the more interested I am in sharing what I have learned with you. You know, I have had the great good fortune to have a very unique skill set. You know, I've gone from Western medical training and general surgery to shamanic healing, to ancestral healing, to yoga nidra. You know, I've got a lot of tools in my toolbox. And for me, it has been critical to have all of these different points of view so that I can identify where center is for me. I've been saddened by the fact that some integrative modalities are too small, but I think that understanding that we all have the power to heal is essential, and that's why I'm sharing it with you. I honestly did not have any illusions about doing a summit until I shared my vision with my mentor and colleague and friend and spiritual guide, Jocelyn Mercado. And she said to me one day, well, why don't you do a summit? And of course I said, absolutely not. I couldn't do that. And yet the seed was planted, and here we are. So even though I still have headaches, I still have some issues going on, I have a much deeper sense of wholeness and connectedness that is bringing me more to life, that's bringing me out of the numbness and toward the joy, helping me understand the obstacles as teachers, the difficult people as opportunities to see where I need to do more work, and to learn that we all possess these innate capacities to heal, and we've just forgotten. All that you need lies within you. We're looking out there for what lives in here. And so I have identified 5 very, very simple but essential practices for awakening your inner healer and getting to the root of your dis-ease. You know, again, all based on ancient wisdom and my own personal experience of my life. And again, they're very, very simple, but not often very easy. So just consider these 5 things for a few moments. I think at the core, the most important thing is to learn to pay attention, to be aware. Paying attention changes your experience. And when you think you already know, you stop paying attention. So if we're moving through the world with the been there, done that mentality and not realizing or remembering or knowing for the first time that this moment, no matter how familiar it seems, has never happened before and will never happen again, we don't have access to the healing that could occur in this moment. So just this, that's all I have to do. I can't pre-live my life. I can't plan really for the worst case scenario without robbing myself of the capacity to live now. But I can digest my life in bits. And the only thing I need to do is just this. The left brain lives in the past and the future. The invitation of the right brain and coming into balance is to notice when I'm gone and to choose to come back to now. Because if I really want to affect the trajectory of my life, I'm going to have to do it from this moment when I am alive. I cannot change my life if I miss this moment because I'm lost in the past or worries about the future. Worry really just robs us of the capacity to choose and to heal. And anytime you get stuck in that worried mind, that anxious mind, that thinking mind, coming to your senses is an antidote. Your brain can't do two things at the same time. And so choosing to come to your senses just settles the left side of the brain down. Because if there's really an emergency, if we really are feeding information from the heart and the gut to the brain, if I take a deep breath, or if I look outside, or if I sigh, or if I smile, that information goes back to the brain, and it absolutely interrupts the fight or flight response or the freeze response, because it's like, wait, if there's an emergency, I would not be breathing out or smiling at the sunset or noticing the hawk flying outside. So we have control over what information goes to our brain, regardless of if we're paying attention. When we start to choose, then we have even more power. The essential key, though, for paying attention is to do so without judgment. Again, the left brain just really goes for it. It wants to go over and over and over how things are going. And I like to imagine or when I feel myself getting out the scales, like this is what I've got, but I thought it was going to be like that. That to me is an invitation to put the scales away and come to my senses. Because this moment is the only moment that you have to live. And it's just like this. The invitation is, in this moment, with it being like this, how am I going to use the information of this moment to respond rather than react based on the past? I want to use the information of this moment to choose my next step. And that's the beginning, I think, of healing, being aware. The second thing that is essential and has been really important for me is to befriend everything. To befriend my body, to lean into the pain, not to try to resist. Resistance is one of the major causes of suffering. You know, if I have a headache, I can like it or not, but not wanting to have it or thinking something else should be happening always makes it worse. So I just lean into it. I just pay attention to it. I befriend it. I try to see with things as they are, is there anything in this moment that I can notice or shift to find a place of ease? And if there's not, how can I at least not make it worse than it already is? It starts with remembering, which is literally coming back into your body. Again, remembering that your gut has a brain and your heart has a brain. If you're not there, you're missing access to really critical information about what is true. So really tuning in to what your gut is telling you, seeing your traumas, your dis-ease as a mindfulness bell, as a teacher, as an opportunity to turn towards something that needs your attention, to stop fighting against your disease. I really am resistant to the notion of being in a battle against drugs or cancer or alcohol. When I do that, I'm turning on my fight or flight response. I'm stealing resources that could better be used for my own healing. So I don't want to fight with my situation. I want to befriend it. Now, please understand, I am not in any way minimizing serious trauma and its effects on body, mind, and spirit. But I also know from my own experience that there are traumas that we don't recognize that are available to us to work with in the moment to keep us from forming these deep energetic patterns that keep us from feeling well and whole. The other part of being in your body, I think, is about doing spiritual work. It seems that a lot of people are doing a lot of transcendent spiritual work without being grounded in their body. And my energy work in particular, and my work with yoga, really tells me that if I am putting a lot of high frequency energy in and I don't have the container to hold it, it's like I'm going to short circuit. It's too much energy for my container. So first I need to ground and root and create the container that will allow me to hold the energies that are coming in. Now, this goes for spiritual experiences, but it also goes for just healing in general, creating the conditions that allow me to hold whatever arises. Many of us in the Western world have root chakra issues because the root chakra is about grounding, it's about support, it's about financial integrity, it's about feeling safe. And there's a lot of fear and dis-ease in our culture right now. So the more work we do to really ground and settle and create the conditions to feel supported and at ease, the better off we're going to be. So the third thing that is essential, in my opinion, is to be kind. You know, self-compassion, I think we talk about, we pay it lip service. It's often easier for us to be kind to others than to ourselves. It was certainly true for me. And my experience with self-compassion really was exponentially increased when I sat down one day and just wrote down all of the traumatic experiences of my life, large and small. I filled 4 pages full of trauma, front and back. I had a headache for days afterwards, so it's not necessarily something you want to try at home without support. But what it did was allow me to look back at the entirety of my life and be amazed that I was alive, that I was here, that I was functional at all. And from that place, self-compassion naturally arose. Now, when I was doing my first training with John Kabat-Zinn, I remember him saying that denying the experience that you're having is a form of violence to yourself. So there's plenty of violence in the world. Contributing to that violence by not attending to the gut feeling that we have or to the dis-ease that we feel in the presence of another person is a form of violence. And to really start to be kind to yourself and honor yourself and take care of yourself and tend yourself so that you're creating that container in which you can heal. You do matter and you are important, and it matters to treat yourself as if you're a loved one. You know, Lady Gaga apparently has said that she spends tons of time creating and crafting relationships with others, but realized one day that she hadn't spent a bit of time creating an intimate relationship with herself. And that's what this is. Because all you get in this lifetime is your experience. And if you deny the experience that you're having, you're at the mercy of the world. So be kind. And you must believe yourself when you're saying things like that. You know, you can't just do the, I forget what movie that came from. I am important and I am kind and I am beautiful without believing it. Your nervous system is going to resist that. Your energy body is going to resist that. So you say something that is true. If you're doing something that somebody else says is good for you that you don't believe or resonate with, in Ayurveda, it's said that that medicine, even though it could theoretically be the right medicine, it's not going to work because there's an energetic dissonance that's keeping the medicine from having its desired effect. So when you come home to yourself and speak your truth, you're creating the energetic container to allow access to joy and ease and peace and healing. You really start to see and believe in greater things organically. Gratitude arises. You don't have to create gratitude. It arises because you're honoring the experience that you're having. And then to the support of those 3 things, number 4 is to create a practice that is personalized and specifically geared to you and what you need to maintain balance. You know, so many of us do things that we're supposed to do. Yoga is supposed to be good for you, and it's supposed to be good for me too. But when I was having a lot of neck and shoulder pain, it was not good for me. So to understand that healing practices are not one size fits all either, to get to know yourself and what resonates with you, to be you. Most of us really don't have an idea of who we are. Now, top of my list, pretty much for everybody, if you're open, is energy medicine. And the reason for that is because it's out of our radar. We don't have a lot of thought about it. And so it sort of sneaks in through the cracks. We don't have opinions, and it allows an experiential taste of what is possible without your left brain driving the show. Meditation is very important if it's good for you and resonates with you. Yoga, yoga nidra, same thing. Nature-based practices, to the extent that you can be outside in the world, are incredibly important. And some understanding of the science of it helps, really, just to open the door. But I want to be crystal clear. I don't think science alone, or the left brain alone, or the evidence-based intention and practice of Western medicine is big enough to support the reality that is present in this moment. It really closes us in and shuts us down, and we are way bigger than this. What you experience is your life, and your experience changes your genes, changes your neural pathways, and we're taking back our power. We always get to choose, and we're choosing practices that resonate deeply with us individually and bring us to life. And then the final thing is really to establish a safe space, or to find a safe space, a community, someone or ones who can hold space for you and be a mirror so that you can see who you are and believe in what you can do, even when you can't believe in yourself. Somebody that can make space for you to see possibilities that you can't consider, and doesn't tell you what to do, doesn't try to fix you because you're not broken, just reminds you of who you are and allows you to help to see the wholeness and let your truth come through. That's been the thing I think that I've been seeking for my whole life. This place to be real, this place to be me, to be accepted fully as I am. And that really applies to me accepting me as I am fully as well. Social engagement, finding others with whom you feel safe with, is healing in its own right. And it takes great courage to realize that the people that you are surrounding yourself with are not ones that bring you to your best. So creating relationships of trust, containers in which you can see your true self, are really essential, because trust allows deep and lasting healing. And finally, as my cat swipes her tail across the camera, I think that simplicity is really critical. I'm sure you're like, wait, we got to the end and these are the 4 things you're going to tell us? Well, simplicity is really key. We make things so much more complicated than they need to be by thinking about what's supposed to be happening. It can be hard to simplify, but truly just paring away all of the things that make life be too challenging, starting to taste the food that's in your mouth, feel the wetness and coolness of water when you need a drink, to see the glory of trees as they change color in the autumn, or feel the breeze on your skin. These things alone are healing. And again, it's not one size fits all. You must have the experience that you can digest, that supports you. So simplifying, looking around, feeling what feels good for you is really part of the healing. So my free gift for this summit is to offer 3 people a 45-minute session that helps you get to the root of your personal disease and activate your inner healer. Again, I think the safe space in which to explore is one thing that's been elusive to me. And so it would be an honor for me to hold space for you while you start to see in a bigger way what you're capable of. I want to be clear, I am no longer practicing medicine. I do not have a license. I am not offering medical advice, nor am I a licensed therapist. But I am a longtime teacher and mindfulness instructor and student of life. I have Western medical experience that I cannot deny because it's been a part of my conditioning. And I think I have a uniquely balanced view between the left and the right brain, between the mystery and the mastery, to bring to the table and help you be able to refine your healing journey. So my intention is absolutely not to diagnose or treat anything, but to simply offer you guidance and support based on my last 25 years, or if I believe it, my many lifetimes before this, to help you move toward a place of greater balance and ease, and to trust that you can, because I know that you can. To me, this is the authentic practice of medicine, offering self-empowering practices. There's my cat. that allow you to create the conditions for optimal healing and enhance the healing possibilities of any other therapies that you may need. So if this is intriguing in any way to you, or if you're interested, please just shoot me an email at gina@ginasager.com. Tell me a little bit about who you are and what your story is, what has worked and what has not worked, and what you long for. Are you willing to do some work to achieve your wildest dreams? Because it is absolutely possible. So I thank you so much for your attention and time. I want to just end by checking in for a moment. So just settle into your seat as we end this part of our time together for just a few moments of reflection. So just for a moment or two, if you're willing and able, let your eyes close. Come into your body and notice if there's any new awareness, no matter how large or small, of this magnificent container in which you live. Any new communication channels that may have been opened between the heart and the gut and the head. Any felt sense of being actually bigger than this body. You know, we're all made of mostly space. Can you get a sense of the energy that surrounds this body and connects you to all things? Tune in for a moment to the breath and the way that it's breathing you. And maybe imagine literally feeling the breath going out to feed and nourish the trees which take in your out breath. Feel the trees breathing out so that you can breathe in again. Even breath connects you to all things. Notice any changes in your awareness of breath. And notice your mind and whether there's any new space in your mind now for things that maybe you didn't know before. See if you can open your awareness to the entirety of your nervous system, your brain, and beyond. Your mind, which is more like a quantum field that connects you to all things. Just tune in to how it feels to be you now. So, a favorite poet of mine, Rupi Kaur, says, "It was when I stopped searching for home within others and lifted the foundations of home within myself. I found there were no roots more intimate than those between a mind and body that have decided to become whole." Mm. It is my deep wish that you will be inspired by this summit and find whatever it is that you need. Creating this summit has been an absolute labor of love. And it's my deepest, most heartfelt wish for you that you feel seen and heard and know that you have the capacity to heal. It's just a matter of remembering. It's not so much about learning new things as it is discarding all the things that are too small or not supportive of your life purpose. Your healing is a gift for all of us, and we all have more power than we know. Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor said that we live in a world that's 85% left brain and 15% right. And in this summit, I have literally tried to flip the ratio so that we have 85% experiential practices or things that are more right-sided and 15% left, so that you get a felt sense in the course of being a part of this summit of what balance feels like, to really experience the mystery rather than just the mastery. I'm so humbled and honored to have had personal time with all of this amazing panel of healers and visionaries and wisdom keepers. They've all been gracious enough to join us and offer their guidance and heart work so that we all can move toward a place of greater healing and wholeness. I can't wait for them to share their love and their unique points of view with you. I wish you love and inspiration and deep healing. I wish for each and every one of you to find the support and courage that you need to embrace every single step of your journey toward wholeness, to be self-empowered and come into your fullest, most magnificent glory. I wish for each of us to stop trading mystery for mastery, to realize that we matter more than we know, and that it's possible to be healed and whole regardless of a diagnosis. May this summit be of benefit to absolutely everyone with whom we share life, both known and unknown in all realms. I thank you from my heart for tuning in. If you have questions or concerns as we move through the summit, if there are technical difficulties, please email me at gina@ginasager.com. I'll do my best to keep up. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your presence. I wish you lots of love.